This video is the second part to the intro to Chapter 6. A couple of inequalities, and then we transition into some other percentage type problems. So first here they're saying write an inequality and sketch a number line graph for each scenario. They tell us to assume it is discrete. So in the earlier video we talked about how it could be discrete or continuous. This one they want us to assume it's discrete. Remember, that means it is countable, not measurable, but countable. Only whole numbers make sense. Then, after, there's the countable right there. Then after we do that, they want us to write an inequality and sketch a number line for the complement of the scenario. Remember, complement is a way of saying the opposite. So if there's a 20% chance of rain, then the complement would mean there's an 80% chance that it does not rain, the opposite, okay? When we see that word complement, we see that little C on the scenario, we think the word not, okay? All right, so let's try these here. More than 9. Okay, well, more than 9 means X is greater than 9. Can't equal 9. It's got to be more than 9. Okay, now remember, this is discrete. So on our number line graph over here, put a few numbers on each side. Greater than 9 would be above 9. Now, they said it was discrete, so that means it could be 10, 11, 12, and I'm going to color the arrow to show that that keeps going. I'm not coloring the whole line because that would be continuous, including decimals and fractions. They said assume it was discrete. Okay? I didn't color the 9 because it doesn't have an equal to. Okay, the complement means what is the opposite, or what is not more than 9. Okay, well, the opposite would then be less than or equal to 9. One of them's got to have an equal to. So since it's not this one, it must be the complement down here. Okay, and the graph for that one, I'll put my same numbers. And less than or equal to 9 would be 9, 8, 7, 6, etc. Again, I'm just coloring the actual whole numbers, not the decimals and fractions in between. Okay, next one, at least 13. At least 4, number 13 says X is at least 4. At least 4 means 4 is the minimum. It could be more than 4, so greater than or equal to 4. Since it's discrete, we're only going to color the individual dots, starting with the number 4. So 4, 5, 6, and the arrow to show that it keeps on going. The complement, in other words, the opposite of at least 4, or X is greater than or equal to 4, would be X is less than 4. Only one of them can have the equal to sign. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Less than 4, again, this is discrete, so we're not going to include the number 4. Only the 3, the 2, and the arrow to show that it keeps going down. We're not coloring the 4 here because it does not have the equal to sign. Okay? All right, transition into some percent type problems. We've done percent problems earlier in the semester, but it's going to start coming up a little bit more in Chapter 5 and 6. So let's revisit that. In Chapter 6 and 7, so let's revisit that again. Okay, the Smith family spends 35% of their monthly budget on rent. How much is their rent if the budget has $2,500, $2,500? There's a couple of ways that you can work this. I'm going to show you both ways. It does not matter to me which way you do it. Whichever one you're more comfortable with is fine. First one I'm going to point out is a proportion. Remember, a proportion is like an analogy. This is to up is to down as on is to off, or up is to down as hot is to cold, or whatever. You decide what the relationship is between the first two words, and you maintain that relationship through the other two. So percents are always out of 100. When they say 35%, they're saying 35 out of every 100. Okay, well, that's great. That means you spend $35 out of every $100 that you make on rent. But they didn't make $100. They made $2,500. So we need to see what equivalency would go right here where I put the X, so that this relationship is maintained through both fractions. In order to solve a proportion, we can cross multiply. So 35 times 2,500, which is 87,500, has to be equal to 100 times x. When we cross multiply, those two sides have to be equal to each other. So now I can solve this equation for x. I'm going to divide both sides by 100. And 87,500 divided by 100 is 875. That means the rent is $875. Now, that's one way to solve it, is with a proportion, okay? The other way to solve it is to say, hey, I'm going to convert this 35% to a decimal, which the decimal will be 0.35, and then let's multiply the decimal times that whole thing, times the 2,500. So 0.35 times 2,500. And either way, we get $875. It does not matter to me which way you solve this one. You get the same answer either way. Whichever way makes more sense to you is totally fine. All right, number 15. 400 patients are chosen for a medical research study. 9% of them are type B plus blood. How many of the patients are type B plus? Okay, so again, you can do a proportion. 9% means 9 out of every 100 patients are B plus, but we didn't have 100 patients, we had 400. So how many are type B out of the 400 when 9 out of every 100 are? So again, cross multiply, 100x would have to equal 9 times 400, which is 3,600. Divide both sides by 100 to get x by itself, and x is 36. Or your other option, convert 9% to a decimal, 0.09, and multiply by 400. You may have heard in other math classes, of means multiply, so we want 9% of 400, so 0.09 times 400. And either way, we're going to get 36. Okay, so 36 patients are type B plus blood. Number 16 on the back here, next page. On a class test, there were 12 A's, 15 B's, 8 C's, 3 D's, and 2 F's. What percent of the class earned a B? What percent passed the test with a D or better? And what percent did not pass? Okay, first of all, let's see how many people are in this class. If we add up 12, 15, 8, 3, and 2, we get a total of, 40? 40 people are in the class. So for question 1 here, what percent of the class earned a B? Well, there were 15 B's. 15 out of the 40 people earned a B. So we need to know what percent that is. That would be x out of 100. In other words, if 15 out of 40 earned a B, but if there were 100 in the class, however many got B's would be our percent. So you can cross multiply and divide. 1,500 equals 40x. Divide by 40. Which is 37.5. Now, you probably did not have, 37.5 equals x. So remember that x number is our percent number. So that would mean 37.5% made a B. Okay. Part 2 here, what percent passed the test with a D or better? So remember, D or better would be everyone except for these 2 F's. So 12 plus 15 plus 8 plus 3 is, 38? Of course it's 38 because there were 2 F's, so that, if 2 F's, that would leave 38 people that did not make F's. So 38 out of 40 made a D or better. We need to know what percent that is, what that is out of 100. So cross multiply and divide. 3,800 equals 40x. And we get 95. So that means 95% passed with a D or better. Okay, 95 out of 100 would have passed. Okay, and then the last part, what percent did not pass the test? Okay, well, the people who failed or did not pass were these 2 F's. So 2 out of 40 people failed. How many is that out of 100? Percent always means out of 100. So again, we can cross multiply. 200 equals 40x. Divide both sides by 40. And we ought to get 5. 200 divided by 40, 5. So that means 5% failed. Now, if you were really watching carefully, you probably could have avoided using this proportion. If 95% passed, doesn't that leave only 5% left? That must have been the ones that failed. So the percent who passed and the percent that failed ought to add up to 100%, which they do. Remember, the word for that is complement, okay? 95% passed, then the complement is the other 5%. Excuse me. Not corona, just a tickle in the throat. Okay, number 18. For fall semester, there are 560 admission applicants to Cougar U and 700 admission applications to Unicorn College. If their acceptance rates are 45% and 30% respectively, which school admitted more students? Okay, let's talk about that word respectively. When they say respectively, that means the order that they were mentioned in matches up to the order the two categories were mentioned earlier. Okay, so the first school they mentioned was Cougar U. Okay, in Cougar U there were 560 applicants. And it says their acceptance rates are 45%. Since 45% is the one they say first, it needs to match up to the school that they said first. That's what respectively means. So 45% of those 560 applicants were accepted. The other school, Unicorn College, said they had 780 applicants. And they were the second school mentioned, so they're going to be the second percentage in the next sentence here. So they had 30% accepted. Now, notice what happened here. Unicorn College had more applicants, right? They had 780 compared to 560 at Cougar U. So Unicorn College had more applicants. But 30% of their students were accepted, and that's lower than the 45% accepted at Cougar U. So, which kind of makes sense. If more people applied there, they probably have room for less people who, so it's so popular and they can't accept every single person. So there's probably going to be a little bit lower acceptance rate there. That kind of makes sense if they don't have room for all those folks. So they want to know which school admitted more students. Okay. Well, 45% of these 560 got in. You could use a proportion, or you could say 0.45 times 560. Which is 252. You did a proportion, you would say 45 out of 100 equals X out of 560. 560 is the grand total, so how many out of those 560 got in? Just like 45 out of 100 would have got in. Cross multiply and divide, and you would still get 252. At Unicorn College, 0.30 times 780 is 234. If you went the proportion route, you would say 30 out of 100 equals X out of 780. How many out of the whole 780 got in? And when you solve that proportion, you would still get 234. Okay? All right, so the question was, which school admitted more students? Cougar U admitted 252. Unicorn College admitted 234. 252 is higher. So Cougar U accepted more students. Okay, and then the second part here, what is the combined acceptance rate of the two schools? And the temptation there is to say, oh, 45% here, 30% here, add them together, 75%. But that's not it, okay? We need to kind of refigure based on all the applicants. So 252 people got in at Cougar U. 234 got in at Unicorn College. So between the two schools, 252 plus 234, 486. 486 is how many total students were accepted. So a combined 486 students got into one of those schools. Okay? There were 560 applicants at one school, 780 at the other, for a grand total of 1,340 total applicants. So between the two schools, 486 out of 1,340 people got in. Now, some got into Cougar U and some got into Unicorn College, but 486 out of 1,340 students got in somewhere. We want to convert that to a percent. So how many is that out of 100%? So we cross multiply. 486 times 100 equals 1340 times x. Divide by 1340. So 48,600 divided by 1340 is 36.26865, blah, 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 blah. Now, note that they want us to round to the nearest tenth of a percent. So to the nearest tenth, this would be 36.3% for a combined acceptance rate. So in other words, 36.3% of all applicants got in somewhere. Some of them got into Cougar U, some of them got into Unicorn College, but 36% of all the applicants got in somewhere. Okay? Now, if you think about it, that's a reasonable answer because Cougar U had a higher acceptance rate at 45. Unicorn College had a lower acceptance rate at 30, so combined it ought to be somewhere in between 30 and 45%, and it was. 36% is in between. Okay? Think about that one carefully. That one's kind of a tricky one there. All right, next one. The proportion of males who are colorblind is 0.12. Okay? Remember, proportion is sort of like percentage. It's saying how many kind of out of the total there. What's the proportion? So in other words, 0.12 would be like 12%. Okay? Find the number of males that are colorblind in a group of 10,000 males. Okay? So in other words, 12% of all males are colorblind. So out of 10,000 males, how many would you expect to be colorblind? Two options. Either multiply 0.12 times 10,000 or say 12 out of 100 equals x out of 10,000. 12 out of every 100 are colorblind, so how many is that out of 10,000? Either way will work. I think that multiplying the decimal is faster, so I'm going to do it that way. But either way will work, and we get 1,200. So 1,200 are expected to be colorblind. Now, notice that is not a guarantee that in a random group of 10,000 males that exactly 1,200 will be colorblind. It could be a little higher, could be a little lower, but it ought to be about that number. Okay? This is kind of like a percentage or probability type of problem. It doesn't use that word percent. It doesn't use the word probability. But remember, pick your favorite P word. Proportion, probability, percent. They're kind of all saying the same thing. So we would expect 1,200 to be colorblind. Okay? Number 20, 8% of females have a height less than 5 feet. How many females have a height under 5 feet in a group of 5,000? So same idea that we just did. 8% means 8 out of 100. So if 8 out of every 100 female are less than 5 feet tall, then how many are under 5 feet out of 5,000? So x out of 5,000. Solve the proportion. Cross multiply and divide. Option 2 is to convert that 8% to a decimal, which would be 0.08, and multiply it by 5,000. You will get the same answer either way. I think multiplying the decimals faster. So 400. So would you expect if 8 out of every 100 are under 5 feet tall, then we expect 400 out of 5,000 to be under 5 feet tall. So 400 are expected to be under 5 feet. Again, it's not a guarantee. That's just, an estimate. Probability, proportion, percentage, pick your favorite P word. That's how many we would expect. No guarantee, but it ought to be close to that. Okay, if suddenly 3,000 of them were under 5 feet tall, then that would be a sign that something went wrong. Okay, maybe we didn't do a good job of picking a random sample because we would expect about 400. 21. 3/4 of the households in a rural area have pets. That word's always hard for me to say. Rural. 3/4 of the households in a rural area have pets. How many households have pets in this area if there are 3,500 total households? Okay, well, 3/4 is a fraction, but it means that 3 out of 4 have pets, right? 3/4 means 3 out of every 4. How many, so 3 have pets out of every 4. So how many would have pets out of 3,500? So I can use a proportion there, okay? Can cross multiply 4 times x, and that will have to be equal to 3 times 3,500, which is 10,500. Divide both sides by 4 to get x by itself, and we get 2625. That means we expect 2,625 of the 3,500 houses to have pets. Now, another option is to just take that fraction there, because remember a fraction is the same as a percent, is the same as a decimal, okay, and multiply it by the total number. So 3/4, I'm going to put that in parentheses, 3/4 times 3,500, and I get that same 2625. Okay, if you'd rather use it as a decimal, 3/4 is 0.75. So you could multiply 0.75 times 3,500, and you're going to get the same answer. So there's different ways to think about it, but I think multiply either the proportion or multiplying the decimal or fraction, either way is the same thing. Okay? All right, so that's the end of our intro to Chapter 6. The next video, we'll start working on the actual Chapter 6 material. I can get that.